Hey everyone! Welcome to the Bold and Beautiful 24. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Bold and Beautiful, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. Lee is compelled to disclose to Luna that she is her biological mother. Lee Finnegan had never wanted this day to come, but the walls had finally closed in on her, and as much as she had built her entire adult life around control, secrecy, precision, and discipline, she suddenly found herself at a loss, cornered by the weight of her past choices and by the relentless demands of the present, and when she looked at Luna Nozawa sitting in front of her, eyes red, face streaked with tears, posture fragile but still defiant, she realized that she could no longer dodge, no longer manipulate, no longer sidestep the inevitable confrontation that had been looming over them for months, if not years. The truth, brutal and terrifying as it was, had to come out, and so she inhaled deeply, clutching her hands together so tightly her knuckles whitened, and said the words that would forever change both of their lives. Luna, I'm your mother, and the world seemed to stop in that instant, as though the earth itself tilted on its axis, and the Forrester mansion, where this showdown had exploded after another heated dinner where emotions had spilled and accusations had flown, fell into silence so heavy it could choke the breath out of anyone who dared breathe, and Luna, already struggling under the weight of revelations about her identity, her mistakes, and her future, stared back at Lee with eyes that widened in horror, confusion, disbelief, and a kind of wounded hope that frightened even her, because this couldn't be real, this couldn't be happening, this couldn't be the final puzzle piece to the fractured mess of her existence. And yet Lee's voice, though trembling, though breaking apart with emotion she had never allowed herself to show, repeated again, softer but firmer, I am your mother, Luna, not Poppy, not anyone else, you are mine. And as those words sank in, the dam of silence broke, unleashing the chaos of decades of secrets and lies, and the storm of feelings Luna had buried came surging to the surface with brutal force, and she shook her head violently, refusing to accept, to process, to comprehend, her voice breaking into a scream of betrayal and heartbreak as she demanded to know why Lee would lie to her all these years, why she would let Poppy play the role of mother, why she would stand in judgment of Luna as though she were some shameful outsider instead of her own flesh and blood. And Lee, tears streaming down her own face now, something rare, something shocking for the icy, disciplined woman who had built her reputation on toughness, confessed in agonizing detail how she had been young, scared, ashamed when she had given birth to Luna, how she had believed that giving her child to her younger sister Poppy would give Luna a better chance, a freer chance, a chance at joy that Lee herself, with her rigid sense of duty, could never provide, how she had convinced herself that hiding the truth was protecting both Luna and herself, but that in reality it had been cowardice, pure and simple cowardice wrapped in a mask of sacrifice. And now, with Luna staring back at her like a stranger, with years of resentment boiling beneath the surface, she finally understood that the lie had destroyed more than it ever could have saved, and Luna sobbed, clutched her chest, nearly collapsing under the tidal wave of pain as she remembered every time Lee had looked at her with contempt, every time Lee had judged her, every time Lee had claimed that she was weak, reckless, unworthy, every cutting remark that had left scars that never fully healed, and all of it twisted now into a grotesque irony because those weren't the words of a disapproving aunt, they were the words of a mother who had abandoned her, who had punished her, who had pretended she was nothing, and the betrayal was so vast, so consuming, that Luna could barely form words, but she finally spat out through sobs, You hated me. You hated me and I never knew why, and all along it was because you couldn't face yourself. And Lee collapsed too, falling to her knees, clutching Luna's hands in desperation, begging for forgiveness, swearing that her love had been real all along even when it was buried under layers of denial, promising that everything she had done, no matter how cruel it had seemed, had been in some warped way an attempt to push Luna to be stronger, to be better, to be the kind of woman who could survive this brutal world. And Luna, trembling, broken, didn't know whether to scream, to run, or to cling to the mother she had always wanted but had never known she had. And as the emotions boiled over, other family members began to arrive. Finn, stunned to discover his cousin was in fact his sister, Steffi, caught in the crossfire of another Finnegan family implosion, Bill Spencer, watching with that calculating glint in his eye as he realized the revelation could destroy or save Luna depending on how it was handled. Katie Logan, furious that the secret had been kept while her son Will's life had already been dragged into Luna's chaos, and Sheila Carter, of all people, standing at the edges of the storm, oddly silent, her eyes locked on Lee and Luna with a mixture of satisfaction, regret, and yearning, as though even Sheila, the perennial pariah, understood that this revelation was something that would alter destinies forever, and as the shouting, the crying, the accusations, and the pleas filled the mansion, one thing became crystal clear: this was no longer just a family feud, no longer just another scandal to be swept under the rug. This was the kind of revelation that would ripple through every corner of Los Angeles, every relationship, every fragile bond that held the Forrester and Spencer worlds together, because Luna's identity had been rewritten in one breath. Lee's image had been shattered in one confession, and the fallout was only just beginning. And as the night dragged on, with voices rising, with alliances shifting, with hearts breaking, Luna finally stood, wiped her tears, and whispered with a mix of fury and grief that chilled everyone to the bone, "You stole my life, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive you," before walking out into the night, leaving Lee crumpled, sobbing, and begging for another chance, and leaving everyone else to wonder what kind of woman Luna would become now that she knew the truth of her blood, her betrayal, and the mother who had lived as her greatest enemy. Luna stormed out into the cool Los Angeles night, her heels clattering against the marble floor of the Forrester mansion before hitting the pavement, each step echoing with the fury and heartbreak boiling inside her, and though her body shook and her chest heaved, she couldn't stop, couldn't breathe, couldn't let anyone follow her, because if she stayed another second under that roof, with all of their eyes on her, she'd explode. She'd scream so loud that every lie her so-called mother had ever told would come crashing down with it, and behind her Lee was on her knees, clutching the rug, her sobs guttural and raw, her carefully composed mask of perfection destroyed in front of everyone she had ever tried to impress, and Finn stood frozen, reeling, his entire medical mind trying to calculate the science of this mess, how the sister he had believed he barely knew was in fact his flesh and blood, his half-sister, his mother's firstborn, which made every judgment, every icy glare from Lee against Luna all the more monstrous, because how could a mother weaponize shame against her own daughter? And Steffi, watching Finn's face crumble, realized that no amount of strategy or planning could shield her family from this implosion, that every fragile bond she had been clinging to was about to detonate, because if Finn couldn't forgive Lee, how could he forgive Luna? And if Luna's rage curdled into revenge, how long before she lashed out at everyone again, especially at Will Spencer, who was already struggling after being drawn into her chaos, and Bill Spencer, standing in the corner with Katie, exchanged a look with her, the kind of look only decades of shared history could carry, and he muttered low enough for only her to hear, "This changes everything. This girl is not merely a lost stray, she is Lee's kin," which signifies her connection to Finn and Steffi, thus integrating her into this entire dynasty. Katie, despite her seething anger over Luna's actions towards Will, had to concede through clenched teeth that Bill was correct, as this revelation irrevocably linked Luna to everyone, regardless of their desires. Meanwhile, Sheila lingered at the periphery of the room, her lips curling into a concealed smile, relishing this unraveling like the most exquisite dessert she had ever experienced. Observingly, a woman who had long asserted her superiority over Sheila succumbed to the burden of her own hypocrisy. Sheila murmured to herself, barely audible, "So, little Lee possesses skeletons as well," and she could already sense the leverage materializing, the potential for blackmail, the schemes, the methods by which she could exploit this revelation to inch closer to Finn, to Steffi, to acceptance. If Lee could deceive regarding her own daughter, how could anyone continue to condemn Sheila as though she were the sole monster present? Meanwhile, Luna remained in the darkness, clutching her car door with trembling hands, incapacitated to drive, incapacitated to think, inundated with memories of Poppy.